Believe it or not, it's actually easier to get a job at a big tech company than it is to get a job at a smaller tech company, smaller consulting, banking offer, right? Specifically, if you're going for a data role, data analyst, data engineer, etc. And so in this video, what I want to do is I want to draw out exactly what it is that is on the interview itself. Because I, as a data engineer who used to work at Amazon, startups, Lyft, right, I had to go through a bunch of interviews, not just at those companies, but at other big tech companies. And so I can show you exactly what was on the interview for all of the big tech companies, not just from the perspective of an interviewer, but also from the perspective of an interviewee, right? Because eventually, after becoming someone who went through the interview rounds, I was somebody who was actually hiring and firing for that specific role. So let's jump into it, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to ace the interview and how you should actually prepare for the data engineer interview specifically. And the first thing I want to do is I want to explain why. Why is it that it's more predictable or easier to get into a big tech company? Very simple. The reason is because of data, ironically enough. The reason data is so important in this instance is because big tech companies interview all the time. They've probably interviewed hundreds of thousands of people, so there's more stuff online for how to prepare, right? The data will go into something like levels.fyi. Check out these two companies. We're not affiliates, right? But if you go to levels.fyi or blind, you'll actually figure out what is on the interview, which means you will be able to prepare better for a big tech company than for a smaller tech company. And so in that case, it actually is easier to get into a bigger tech role because it's more predictable what's going to be on the interview. And so there's a lot of misconception there. It's just because they pay more, sometimes 2 times, 3 times more than what a smaller company will pay, it must be harder. Now, with that said, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to give you exactly the roadmap for what is going to be on the data engineer interview, and I'm going to give you the 5 things you need to know and how to best prepare for it. But before I do that, I actually want to show you a really important framework that I share with my private clients, my private one-on-one clients, which is how you should be thinking about getting this job offer. So here's how it works, right? After having gone through almost 100 interviews myself and having seen my clients go through thousands of interviews, we know that the data engineer interview is going to consist of 5 rounds, right? So number 1 is behavioral questions. Those are the soft skills. Those are the questions you hear. Tell me about a time you did X, right? Number 2, it's going to be SQL. Number 3, it's going to be Python, right? Those are just coding languages that I think most of you know at this point. Number 4, it's going to be data modeling, right? And then number 5, it's going to be some sort of system design / cloud, right? So that's AWS, GCP, right? The biggest one we see is AWS, by the way. Now, with these 5, here's the most important thing you need to know about how you should actually think about getting the job offer. You don't need to be perfect. Let me repeat that. You don't need to be perfect. With these 5 rounds, all you need to do is get a 3.5 out of 5. What does that mean? If you don't ace a round, it is okay. But if you fail 2 rounds, you're probably not getting the job offer. So when you are studying, which is, again, these are the 5 rounds you should study for, prepare for, right? That's a whole different video that you can go to afterwards, right? But with all of these, and again, this is assuming you have a good resume, which is the first step, all you need to do is ace 3.5 out of the 5 in order to get a job offer for potentially 50 to 100% more than what you are earning right now. Now, here is what I tell my clients. With the 3.5 out of 5, the behavioral question is one that you need to ace. Because at the end of the day, you can be the best coder in the world, but if they don't like you, if you're not confident, if you can't communicate and you can't cross-collaborate with other departments, they're not going to pass you. In fact, and I'll give you one little bonus tip right here, the person who is going to be interviewing you for this is typically going to be the hiring manager, or what Amazon, for example, calls the bar raiser, right? And so if this person says no to you, it doesn't matter if you get all other 4 rounds correct, right? You have to actually ace the behavioral question round, and it's where I see engineers messing up the most because they spend 4 months, 5 months doing a bunch of technical stuff when in reality their deficit is more on the soft skills and the communication. So you have to ace behavioral question. But going back here, if we want to get a 3.5 out of 5, here's my recommendation, right? Because again, because we know SQL is going to definitely be on it, what you want to do is you want to ace behavioral question, SQL, and data modeling. Now, the reason I'm saying data modeling is because it's something you can actually learn in about a week. So think about that. You can learn data modeling in about a week. Yes, you have to know SQL. That might take you 1 to 2 months depending on where you are and your experience. And then behavioral questions is just soft skills. So if you think about that, all of that already got you to 3 out of 5. So now, with the Python round, which by the way, not all tech companies do that, and I'll create a different video on that, but with the Python round and with AWS and system design, you really, out of those two, you really only need to get 0.5, 0.75 out of the two, right? If you can get basically each one half correct, even if you mess up a little bit, it doesn't matter because the other interviewers will say, hey, he did well in the other 3. He did okay here. He has some weaknesses. It's good enough. Let's go and hire them. And that brings me to my last and final point, which is how exactly do they go about deciding to hire you? Well, the reality is, if you go through 5 rounds, there's going to be 5 people for each of those rounds. Then what happens is they submit their review, they submit their feedback in some portal. They don't talk to each other, right? Remember this, they do not talk to each other. And so it's like semi-anonymous because they don't want to influence the other person's choice, right? So they don't want to have the bar raiser, right? That hiring manager that we spoke about, they don't want that person to basically overshadow or affect other people's decision. So once they submit it anonymously, the next step is to actually get in a room with all 5 people, and they basically decide, hey, did this person hit 3.5 out of 5? Did we hire them? Do we not? Right? So they look at the feedback, they look at the scores, and then boom, they decide, okay, this is actually somebody we want to bring on. And so again, you have to treat each round like its own check mark that you're trying to get. But the one you don't want to mess up is the behavioral question round, because this is how they're going to decide who to hire based on your cumulative scores. And what I see all the time, and I'll close this video off by saying the biggest mistake, the biggest myth, the biggest misconception, or the biggest mistake, I should say, that I see all the time is that people spend all their time on one thing. Hey, I'm really uncomfortable with Python. I'm going to spend 4 months doing Python, lead code questions, etc. And then in reality, it's only 1 out of like 7 rounds. And then they might ace it, right? By the way, oftentimes they don't because they're so stressed out about it that they get into their head anyways. But then they ace the Python interview and then they fail 2 or 3 other ones and they end up being a 2 out of 5 and they don't get the job anyways. So with that said, you might be wondering, okay, well, let's say I do get the job. How do I actually maximize my offer? And so I'll create a couple other videos based on how to actually ace each round here. But if you are actually interested, okay, what happens after you get the offer? Click on this video here. That's going to be able, if it's created already, based on how to actually negotiate what you are getting, because this part is important to understanding why you can actually get an extra 20, 30, 40 grand per year. Because now that you know how to actually ace or how to prepare best for the interview, this part here will show you how to actually maximize your offer. So I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, click on the subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next video.